some questions. Based on eyewitness account, the killer went straight to Maddie's room. Who knows that? The killer sat down in a chair in Xana's room and left a seat mark in blood.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like you think couldn't they get like maybe fibers or something? Like, and you're like thinking like the butt cheeks. Like, instead of a fingerprint, could you sit in this chair, please, and leave an impression in the chair?
Of your butt. I think we had questions what happened a little bit before, a little bit after. So they showed the car coming in, going out. You know, we know that at some point there's a DoorDash driver, which we may or may not talk about in this episode. But when Kohberger's phone turned back on after the suspect vehicle left the area,
oh yes,
serendipitously, his phone turned on, and I thought it was from closer to Wawa Park coming in towards
I did too.
Idaho.
Yes.
And Dateline showed the exact opposite.
As always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and is speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Oh, and you're in for it today because we have an episode for you. We watched the Dateline episode again.
Yep.
And we have some strong opinions about it. We could barely get through it. So Kim has some opinions about it. I have some opinions. So ladies first.
All right.
Your thoughts?
So troublesome because it's filled with leaks from the case, which is concerning. So major issue with that. And then it was totally biased, one-sided, very few. I think I can cite a couple points that might have been brought up on behalf of Brian.
Yeah, and maybe I'll get to the bias stuff later, but because the episode was about the accused murderer.
Yes, it was.
So that's what they're going to talk about. So when you say bias, that's what the episode was about. It was about all the stuff that was, as you put, leaked to Dateline, was all about the accused murderer. So, I mean, why bring in other stuff? That's what they're talking about in the episode. But that wasn't our biggest, I think, concern. You kept saying throughout the episode, you know, this is leaked. And I kept saying, hey, is this part of the fruit of the poisonous tree and all the stuff that I hear the community talk about, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every time there was one of those leaked moments,
mm-hmm.
You would stand up, you know, or you would be like, see, there it is again, you know, and
or make a snarky comment.
And I have an analogy. Okay. Something that happened to us a long time ago that doesn't have to really do with this murder, but
I'm curious.
Yes, it is something that happened, and I was concerned about that situation when it happened, but I'm almost putting these two together. So see if you remember this scenario. All right. So our daughter played softball,
mm-hmm.
and she was chosen for the all-star team that ultimately keeps going and playing, you know, either, you know, through the regions and the districts and then the state. And,
mm-hmm.
and if you keep winning, you keep moving on.
Tournament.
And yeah, in the tournament. And for the boys, it ends up at Williamsport, Pennsylvania, I believe, you know, where they have the Little League World Series. Well, this was a similar event, a similar sanctioned event. So they were playing, they had won their little group here in our hometown.
Yes, they did.
And they had moved on to the next level. And they were in the finals.
I know where you're going with this.
Oh, good. Yes, I'm glad, because there's a link here. They made it to the finals of the winners bracket. So they were in the finals. They had to win, I believe, 2 games. Or the winners bracket finals winner was there. We had already lost one, but we made it through the losers bracket. Now we're playing for the championship. We had to beat them 2 times,
Right.
because they had 0 losses and we already had one
Right.
by the time we got there. So there was a chance. We had a chance. And the first game that we played this team that was pretty good didn't have their best pitcher on the mound. And we played really well. We won. So now it comes down to
final championship
the
game.
final championship game. They have a loss. They lost to us. We had a loss. We had lost to somebody else, but now we're in the finals, the last game. And they put in their best pitcher, and oh boy, they kind of smoked us. But I mean, it wasn't really close. I mean, we probably lost by 10 runs. And it was a good game. You know, the girls were fighting hard. They saw a glimmer of hope moving on to, like, you know, closer to state. But the girls, you know, really tried hard, but they were disappointed. And I'd never really been around travel ball too much. You know, our kids didn't play travel ball, but we played locally, you know, in this little league. And the parents were just upset that the girls lost. And there was this big group of parents that got together. So I kind of amble over there to see what's going on. And they are ready to protest. Like,
file a complaint.
Yeah, not just, you know, I'm going to have signs, but of a physical, literal protest, because the other team's patch was not located on the jersey in the correct area.
I couldn't remember what it was about.
And so these parents were like, "Oh, we're going to win. We're going on to state because their patch was in the wrong area." And I was like, time out. Do we want to win, not only just win that way, but take it away from those other girls because someone put a patch in the wrong spot on a uniform? I mean, is this really that important, you know, for us to win, to do that? And the analogy I think I'm trying to make here.
I don't agree.
The analogy I'm trying to make here. Watching the game, the other team was better. Watching the game, that pitcher was excellent, and we lost. There's no doubt about it. You put that pitcher and us against each other 10 times, we're going to lose 10 times. It doesn't change what happened on the field. This protest and these fruit of the poisonous tree doesn't change the evidence or the information that we're getting in this case. And what you kept doing last night or the other night when we were watching this was, I can't consider that information because it is the fruit of the poisonous tree. And I'm like, how can you not consider that? Because it has nothing to do with the poisonous tree. It is a you know, a fact or a piece of information that is being brought forward. Why dismiss it because the patch wasn't in the right location?
Well, I don't know if I said I wouldn't consider it, but I keep questioning everything because I keep asking, how did they get to Brian? You know, how that's my number one question. I don't understand all the evidence. And I kept harping on the leaks because someone, and in the Dateline episode, every time they said, according to our source, they would mention the FBI right before that. Like, and so I'm like, is that who the source is? Like someone, because, you know, we'll probably get to talking about the DNA, which is the fruit of the poisonous tree, because we're going to talk about Cece Moore and her point and everything, that, you know, get a warrant, even though they skirted their policy. There were still procedures they could have followed.
So let me say something to your point. So I'm not totally dismissing, you know, because we want Brian to have a fair trial. Right? That is.
Yes, and he should be presumed innocent until proven guilty. And the main issue about these leaks is tainting the jury pool, right? You're putting all this one-sided, in my opinion, information out to the public, and that's just not right. You're like, it's violating his rights to a fair hearing.
Do you think 100% of the population knows about this case?
No.
Okay.
No, that's,
Okay.
I know a lot of people are saying they're not going to be able to find a jury. I know my
Yes, you are.
dad would not
Have
know
no idea what's going
anything
on.
about this
Yeah.
case. So I know people in my own life,
Yeah.
even though I'm obsessed with it and I talk about it all the time, they're like, oh, they think I'm crazy.
Who, what, where,
Yeah.
and no idea.
Barely know that 4 people were killed in a house. Like, that's probably what they know.
Right. Okay. So we have that. We've clarified that. So I want to kind of go back to your point and this fruit of the poisonous tree. I do want Bryan Kohberger to have a fair trial. And there are procedural things that you need to do that a judge is going to rule if you are doing them procedurally correct. Nothing has thrown the case out yet. Okay. Even though we keep hearing fruit of the poisonous tree, nothing has been thrown out yet. So I think there's some, I think there's some, not fabrication, but maybe a little bit of, I'm going to build this up as it's fruit of the poisonous tree because he's not going to get a fair trial. But through the legal system, that hasn't happened yet. That nothing's been thrown out.
Well, that's a non-issue now because it has been ruled upon that they're not even allowed to talk about the IGG process
There you go.
in court. So that's kind of been put aside,
right?
But it's still going to be the question, how'd you get to my client?
There is, during the episode, some of the things that was leaked really caught your concern. And some of them were the selfies. Why were the selfies bothering you so much?
Yeah, and this is where I'm like so one-sided because you have to have the basic understanding. He was a criminology student.
Yes.
All right. So let me make an analogy.
Yes.
Okay. What's my profession?
Educator.
Okay. What am I like fixated on, and what do I do with all my spare time regarding that profession? What am I always doing?
TikToks, watching videos, filming or taking pictures of creative things that you've done. Yeah, it's filled with educational stuff.
Yes, my Google history,
yes,
my social media, my screenshots, my Google Drive, like downloads, everything is just ideas that I see or something I want to learn more about. So insert I'm a criminology person, it would be the same stuff with different content. So the show on Dateline was just, look at these selfies he took of him in a black hoodie. Like because you're wearing a black hoodie, like you're a murderer.
No.
That is how they portrayed it.
No. With love, I'm coming to you with love and peace and joy and happiness in our marriage. What they equated it to was right before he took the selfie with the hood on it, he watched a Ted Bundy episode on YouTube where the thumbnail had Bundy in a hoodie. And they were like, AB, you do what you want.
That is how they portrayed it. Again, a biased, here, let's fit these pieces. We don't know when that selfie was taken. Like, do they?
Yes, we do.
Did they
There's
show
timestamps? There's timestamps.
Did they show that on the show? Like,
yes.
Yes,
honey.
That.
They kept.
All right.
I love you. You're the best.
Verify, but
trust me, I love you. But they were timelining the whole thing.
Okay, again, leaks. Right? That is evidence that's in court that shouldn't be out for the public. I don't think because you put a hoodie on or you're, that you have to assume he's a runner. It was, cold out.
He was
probably going for a run.
I don't disagree. You're not trying to convince me of.
Well, you're bringing up that side, so I'm bringing up this side. That's what we're doing.
But what I'm saying is I'm not disagreeing with you. What that there could be other reasons for, right? There could be other reasons for.
But they didn't present those in the show.
Again, they are doing a show on
yes,
an
they are.
accused murderer
Yeah.
of 4 people in Idaho. That's what they're doing a show on.
Right. But what
So when you have, so in my opinion, when you have a video that has been watched and a thumbnail with, you know, a notorious serial killer wearing a hoodie, and then a little bit later, the accused doing the exact same thing, that's a 2 + 2 moment. You can decide what you want it to be. You know, this and this, make your own equation. If you want to say it's -4, to you it's -4. To me, 2 + 2 kind of equaled 4.
those things,
For the reasons you just mentioned. He's a criminology student.
and those things don't make you a killer.
Nope.
And the hard evidence that would show he was the person doesn't exist. So they're just putting out all this like they're making it seem weird, you know. So they had the wrong year on the car to begin with.
Dateline
They
did?
changed. No, I'm not talking about Dateline.
Oh.
I'm just talking about evidence that we know. The people that are questioning if they have the right person know the lack of hard valued, concrete, non circumstantial evidence, right? They changed the year of the car. That's what makes everybody question this and think that it's not the right thing. They don't have his license plate. They keep saying, "Oh, his car was going by the house." It was just a white Elantra that they think. People are even questioning that now because the video footage that they have to prove that doesn't show color. So everything's black and white in that video. What color were the pumpkins? What color were the pumpkins on the porch in the video?
Whitish.
They were white, not whitish. They were white.
Mhm.
And they talked about his Google searches. What struck you the most with those is that was a lot of the Ted Bundy also. And YouTube videos that he watched with like strange lyrics.
Yeah, the Britney Spears thing. And yeah, I understand your point about he's a criminology student. I understand your point that this is maybe what he's passionate about. I would steer you maybe a little bit to he has that passion because he's had a fixation.
I just laugh because that is the narrative. That's the narrative. He's a fixated, trying to figure out how to become the killer, not just studying the killers. So again, we will find out when we go to trial and see the non-circumstantial. This is all like behavioral things that people are looking into and nitpicking and pulling out. So, to me, everything media wise, his photos, his YouTube videos he was watching, those algorithms know what you do online and they're going to feed you what,
Yeah. And he forensically tried to erase all that instead of just sitting there and saying, I'm a criminology student. This is what I study every single day.
Yeah, I had to Google that because they did say that he used, and this is suspicious, and I need an answer to this, that he used anti-forensic cleansing of his computer. And I think, did they say it was the one he had at work at school? Like the one he was using?
Anyone would be suspicious.
Well, I don't know. To me, I think he was using his digital forensic knowledge because he said that's what he went there for. He went there to like, I want to help these rural communities use that technology better, build up their infrastructure. I think because he knew how to use that stuff that he stumbled upon something. I don't know. Or knew he was being set up. Like, don't you think his reaction when he was arrested, his immediate reaction, and I think they even stated in the Dateline episode that when they arrested him and they got in the cop car, he said, "Do you want to, when this is all over, do you want to go get coffee sometime?" Like, who reacts like that?
Well, I mean, you can take one sentence out of context. I'm sure that the officer and Kohberger probably were having a conversation, like, hey, maybe, I don't know, this is all speculation, but maybe they're having a conversation and Kohberger's trying to be cool as a cucumber, being like, well, they really got the wrong guy on this one. I did hear about it somewhat, a little bit, I am from Washington, and he could be playing that whole game, and hey, maybe after this, we'd have a cup of coffee together because they got the wrong guy. I mean, anything could have been said. It makes it seem like he's aloof or confident, right? So it depends on what side you're on. This guy's totally out there or super confident about he didn't do this.
I think that's what the conclusion we're going to come to on every one of these topics we're going to talk about is it depends on how you take it, and it could be taken both ways. Another form of social media that they were saying, like, once he got to Pullman, Washington to start his schooling career, that he started saving photos of like college girls in the area. So, and then they're like, and some of them knew the victims. So even if he randomly, so either it's a connection. Again, you could look at it both ways, or, hey, I'm just a typical college guy that's looking for cute girls. And, I don't know. We didn't grow up in that era. We didn't have cell phones at that time, so we can't say what we would have done or didn't do. But apparently now I've heard a lot of people say, yeah, that would be common.
Okay.
I don't know.
I don't have much to add to that.
And then the other photo that they were relating, not to Ted Bundy, but to, was it that Psycho movie? American Psycho? Is that what the movie was called? Where it's the morning after the murders, and they did say that morning he called his parents at 6:30 in the morning. I think he called them 3 different times. But remember, there's a time zone difference, right? So if it's 6:30 out there, is it
9:30ish?
Okay, so he's calling them earlier to catch them in the morning. That doesn't seem suspicious if it was a normal day for him. And then he's taking a selfie in the bathroom with a dress shirt on and the same pose that supposedly is in that movie. Yeah, like, so they're reading into it like, I did it. And he's now proud of himself. Like, I get frustrated when you and I talk about this case, because I feel like when it's that type of reading into things and, you're more, and I guess because that's your opinion, like, you don't have as much of an issue with speculating about that kind of stuff, or if people were to speculate. The other side of that is that because people were talking about how he had like dexterity issues, as one of his, not disability, but something he has a hard time with, that he was like, look, Mom, I got that new shirt on that you sent me, like that kind of. There's all kinds of thoughts out there to explain everything, which this case keeps giving and giving.
Okay, so all right, a lot of information there, a lot of speculation. You're right. Sometimes if I see something, I'm going to see it as, oh, that is, another small piece of the puzzle toward a guilt, and you see something, you're like, hey, that's, removing a piece of puzzle, because it doesn't mean what you think it means. It means something totally different.
Yeah.
So I understand we both are taking it from our own perspectives. One of the things I did like in the Dateline episode, and either you forgot this earlier or you misremembered, or I don't know, but I want you to come back to it if you could. They did a really good job in the episode putting up the date and the time, because you and I rewound the episode a few times and we're like, okay, what date did that happen? Does that conflict or confirm what we were thinking? So one of the things I thought they did really good in the episode was the timeline of events. But earlier when we were talking about, you were like, well, they didn't have anything with the timeline. So,
Well, I was just talking about that one.
oh, okay.
Just that one piece.
But do you agree that this episode was probably the most detailed about the timeline, even though I didn't agree with everything that they were saying happened at the same time? Because one event of the timeline, they talked about the FBI didn't get confirmation or involved, legally, criminally, whatever, until 3 days after Brian returned home from Washington. But we had heard the FBI had a private little plane and made the Indiana State Troopers pull him over. So how can both be true?
I thought they said at the beginning of the episode that they were a small police department, so they did not hesitate to call in the FBI and the state police.
You are correct.
So that they contradicted themselves.
No, what I'm saying is the FBI didn't identify Kohberger until 3 days after the Kohbergers made it back home.
I thought you said get involved, like they didn't get involved.
No,
you're correct. That's when they're willing to admit when we officially identified him was after that.
Yes. So through the IGG, supposedly, it wasn't confirmed until 3 days after they got home. But we heard stories, even in Bloom's book, about the FBI following him.
Yeah.
And following through some traffic cameras, learned where he was because he took an off route. So how can both of those be?
And they also had a pen, trap, and trace that he mentioned. So they were following him back in Washington. They lost him at one point. Like these were all the talking points. Now I can't remember off the top of my head if I've seen any of that in court documents. So that could just be a bad source by Bloom
or a bad source by Dateline.
Did they mention that in this Dateline episode? They did not. They didn't mention the plane or the anything like that.
They couldn't mention the plane because what they mentioned in the episode was they got confirmation of Kohberger 3 days after he arrived back home.
Even though we've had hearings back over a year now, probably, where the Moscow police said that WSU, remember those security people found his car and the name was sitting there, but we didn't look at it. We didn't know about it until after he was back home.
Correct.
So, okay.
Yeah, they didn't make the connection till later.
The timeline in this episode, they said, was based on an eyewitness account. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I'm assuming they're using Dylan's information, right? And from their source. So, and I think that was another time when they were like, based on FBI something and our source. So putting those two things together. I think the reason why you might think, and we both said that this was a more detailed timeline, is because we know more now. So there was a hearing not too long ago where they mentioned someone running up the stairs and down the stairs. They included that in the timeline. So they're adding this new stuff as they find it out. So in the Dateline timeline, they said that he entered through the unlocked sliding glass door, went straight to Maddie's room, not suspecting to find Kaylee in there with her. And that Xana must have heard the noise from downstairs. They were claiming she's probably the one. And they didn't say probably. They said she ran upstairs to see what was going on, and the killer noticed, chased her back downstairs. And she was trying to make it back to the bedroom, caught her as she was back in the bedroom, and that's where they took out Xana and Ethan. And then, according to this Dateline episode, they said that the police, the investigators, are assuming or saying that Maddie was the target because he went straight to Maddie's room.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
And I'm like, here's some questions. Based on eyewitness account, the killer went straight to Maddie's room. Who knows that? Because I don't remember hearing Dylan in any of their texts or interviews, transcripts. She didn't hear that type of noise. She heard whimpering or crying or, I'm here to help you. Someone playing with the dog upstairs. Oh, maybe because that noise came before the downstairs noise. Okay. So,
well, and crime scene investigators can look at a crime scene and see, okay, this person was probably confronted first, this person second, this person third, this person fourth. You can deconstruct some things without anybody even being in the house. They can kind of say how that happened. I'm no crime scene expert, but
no, but I cannot wait to hear from the medical examiner, and hear all of that, because they should be able to tell all that information. So another new piece of information that Dateline used was that the killer sat down in a chair in Xana's room and left a seat mark in blood. Right? What? You think couldn't they get like maybe fibers or something? Like, I keep thinking like the butt cheeks, like instead of a fingerprint, could you sit in this chair, please, and leave an impression in the chair
of your butt?
I mean, I don't want to be funny about a serious case like this, but we do try to inject humor sometimes. But, I mean, it tells them information about what happened that night, but I don't know if there's any identifying information you could get from that.
No, and I guess reverting back to the timeline of events, I think what Dateline did in this episode was, I think we had questions what happened a little bit before, a little bit after. So they showed the car coming in, going out. We know that at some point there's a DoorDash driver, which we may or may not talk about in this episode, but added an interesting wrinkle. Them leaving, and Dateline saying that they almost hit somebody. So whoever that somebody was could tell us if it was a green or a white Elantra that almost hit them when they were,
True.
out. So, and they could have them look over at the pumpkins and say, what color are the pumpkins, just so we get a good a good assessment of the entire area. And then afterwards, I think there was pretty interesting, because I had thought when Kohberger's phone turned back on after the suspect vehicle left the area, serendipitously his phone turned on, and I thought it was from closer to Wawa Park coming in towards
I did too.
Idaho.
Yes.
And Dateline showed the exact opposite. And I was like, ooh.
Yeah, that's concerning to me. Like, because I thought he was driving back, like no service in Wawa Way Park, and then driving, I think that's going west, going back towards the house. He should have hit the last tower that Dateline mentioned. He should have hit first.
Right.
But that's not how they portray it. So did they portray it correctly or not?
Because I heard the opposite.
Yes.
So that would be interesting. And in all that, so because we were on that part a couple times too, we also mentioned someone's name. Where have they been? What's going on? They could have come out right after this episode and cleared at least that up. But where's Cyree in this?
Oh,
We mentioned Cyree's name about 4 times. Like, well, Cyree would know. What is he saying about this? If all this is out there,
all those documents are sealed. They won't let us see them, and he's not allowed to speak on it.
ugh,
So that's why. And I don't know. I mean, obviously, the prosecution side is leaking information. Why isn't the defense leaking
I wouldn't
anything?
say that.
You think the defense is leaking any of this stuff?
Well, when you say the prosecution side, you're saying everybody who thinks Kohberger is guilty is
Law enforcement.
Okay.
Law enforcement. When I say the
Okay.
prosecution,
Yeah, because that may or may not be the prosecution side. That just may be a rogue person who thinks, I know 100% that this person did it, and and if I need to change public opinion to make it happen, I'm going to do it. Whatever. I don't know, but that has nothing to do with the prosecution or defense. Somebody in this case is giving up information.
It's somebody with access to the information. Who has access to the information? Lawyers and law enforcement.
But doesn't it
and judicial people.
Yeah.
People working, the clerk of courts.
Could be. I mean, it could be true in the Karen Reed trial. Are they leaking stuff to make her look innocent?
It just sticking to the Kohberger case, even though I love the Karen Reed case. Yay, she was found innocent. It's clearly law enforcement on the side of we have the right guy, and they're leaking information. Why? He's weird. He's done these strange things. He's the car and all the things that have been leaked, but nothing's coming out from the defense side. Which you would say
maybe there's nothing to come out. Nothing to come out. Well,
they follow the rule. They've been following the rules.
I would just, you're saying they, like the prosecution and the defense, are controlling all of these law enforcement people who are either in the midst of it or on the outskirts. They don't control that. Well,
and think about this. Cyree is very professional, adamant about wanting to make sure, they're catching and prosecuting the right people. And he's not going to put his expert testimony on the line by leaking something or speaking out when he shouldn't. And then I'm sure they're just chomping at the bit to get him excluded, so I don't think he would do that.
Gotcha. So I think that, depending if you're prosecution or defense, there is some public opinion that goes on. Again, we have 2 high-profile cases going on right now that prosecution side, according to Kimberly, is leaking. Defense side, according to, some people, are leaking to get, their side of the story out there. There are people right now that are doing these documentaries and that are up and coming that, why aren't they talking about the alternative suspect?
Because all that's locked down. You could go on any YouTube channel and find a host of alternative suspects.
So why aren't anybody who believes that, why aren't they coming forward?
Oh, and leaking information?
Where is that tangible information for the alternative suspect? How come that's not getting out there? But all this really bad, shouldn't be released, tangible stuff about Bryan Kohberger is being leaked, and we're like, well, we have to dismiss that. But if there were one piece of alternative suspect leaked, I bet you the community would rally around that and be like, see, this is it. It didn't come from a reputable source, but this is it. But we're throwing away all the Kohberger stuff that gets leaked.
Well, number one, there's information that didn't need to be leaked. It just it just is like the fact that there was unidentified blood on the hand railing and a glove outside that was ignored by law enforcement and investigators. Okay. It didn't do anything with it.
hate when you say that.
Every episode.
I hate when
I'm
you
going to
say
say it
that.
every
I hate when
episode.
you say
Carlos says just because they didn't go with IgG, but
Yes.
they still tested it. But
Yes.
it should have been investigated further. So the
But you
other,
can't. Okay, it should have been investigated further. I agree with you 100%. I agree with you that the community, let's do a GoFundMe right now and pay for an IgG be done on the glove and the handrail, and let's pay for them independently.
okay. Oh, so I said that wasn't leaked. The other DNA that could have been tested, that's just evidence.
Evidence. Yeah.
What was leaked was the Linda Lane video footage early on, which is where we got the information about the roommates' events that night, some phrases that they said, you know, while they were out walking from the bar to the grub truck, the times, their behavior, their mannerism. So a lot of that was leaked, which I feel started the questioning. So maybe that would be something that's more towards defense, right? Putting information out there. Someone, it could have just been the owner of the camera, you know, put that out there like, hey, you know, look at all this stuff. But one of the cameras shows those suspicious people that we talked about on our alternative suspect episode. So that was leaked, and that does show possible, if they were looked into, alternative suspects, you know, someone walking up to a nearby dumpster at 3 a.m. and someone getting picked up at the same dumpster at 5 a.m. That's just one example of something that exists. You know, you can see it. It's not a hypothetical. It's something that was leaked. So, and I think that does not serve the prosecution. I think that serves the defense theory that there are viable alternative people to look into that should have been looked into.
And I'm pretty sure on the two that you mentioned by the dumpster, I'm pretty sure those two people have been interviewed, cleared. But we'll find out when the trial comes out. We will
find out.
But the other thing is, to your point, is the grub truck video, which was the high source of many suspects at the beginning. You know, that's where we're going to find the killer, is in here.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. So let's get into one of the big things of this, which is a culmination of a lot of things we were talking about. Something getting leaked, fruit of the poisonous tree, not following policy, you know, this guy's rights are being violated. The one thing that is so tied to that is what?
Oh, the DNA.
The DNA, the IgG. So that is, and Dateline spent a little time on it. We've had debates about this back and forth a few times, but I think Dateline covered the fruit of the poisonous tree angle the best. So I want to talk about that.
Well, Dateline led into it with, they found the sheath, right? So the crime's over, the sheath is left behind, and they had already mentioned earlier in the episode, and they go back to it again. They definitively said Brian bought a K-bar knife on Amazon.
Yes.
And you and I had a lot of discussion just to talk about the Amazon for a minute, because we did talk about that a lot. That is one document we can see online, and I do think I read it on one of our videos. So I want to go back and look, because I don't remember thinking anything was definitive from his Amazon account.
So let's mark this place and time in this video. And Kim said, I'm going to go back and look and see what the document said, and then write, like maybe right over my head, you know, he did not buy.
I will insert that.
Okay. Go ahead.
That's funny. So the sheath is the source of the DNA.
Right.
So they said that they right away, you know, developed the DNA, had to send it away to another lab, but it wasn't until he was back in Pennsylvania after driving home with his dad, that they got the results, and then that's
The
when they
IgG results,
the IgG results, and then made the arrest.
or started the process to validate the results with the DNA that they were going to start staking out the house and trying to retrieve.
Well, it's
So
not,
that
yes,
just started the process. They were following supposedly, or not following
that's
supposedly,
yeah,
you
that's
know.
up in the air.
But once they got, because we had a big thing about how did they know he was in the Northeast when he was in the West, and I was like, because they narrowed the IgG down to the father of the person who did it. That's what they were able to narrow this genealogy down to. And that person lived in the Northeast. And what they found was that person which is like, wait a minute, they couldn't have done it because they're over here and this happened over here.
Mhm.
And what they found out was, it could be the son, because guess where the son goes to school at?
Right. But they had to
The
verify
West.
it, and they started.
Yeah.
Step one was the trash. They
Yep.
weren't able to get
Yep.
Brian, so
Yeah.
they did it through the father, and then that's how
But I
he
want
was
to,
arrested.
yeah, but I want to take a step back though, because that's the blocking and tackling, right? That's everything that happened. But I think what we were debating at nauseum was this fruit of the poisonous tree. So your belief, at least during the episode, and I'm not going to say it's your belief now, but your belief during the episode was they shouldn't have been able to use that. That should be thrown out, and everything that happened after subsequent to that should be thrown out. And I was like, Dateline took that head on, right? And said, look, it is not the FBI policy to put it into, and I believe it was MyHeritage,
Yes.
which was the largest of the three that they tinkered with.
They used two smaller ones
Yeah.
first.
And there was their policy that they were not going to do that. It was not a law. It was not a regulation. It was not a mandate. It was a policy. So they skirted the policy. And in Dateline's words, because of the gravity of this case, they skirted the policy and put it into MyHeritage, which yielded this result.
So I am not opposed to using that technology. I mean, I do think it should mostly be used in cold cases. I think if you're going to bring somebody in a current case to trial, you should have some other concrete evidence. However, if it was my kid, I would want you to do everything possible.
Okay, so I understand your point about cold case, but who is society? Who would they be more afraid of? The Golden State Killer who's 70 in a wheelchair, or Bryan Kohberger, a young, muscular, potentially active serial killer?
Right, I agree
Who
with
would
you.
we want? Who would we want our law enforcement to get off the street sooner than later?
The perpetrator that
Of
committed the crime.
Of course, the person who is able-bodied enough to commit that crime again and again and put more of society at harm.
Mhm.
Great that we got the Golden State Killer. That dude could barely get up to go to the bathroom.
Mhm.
He wasn't hurting anybody else, even though what he did was atrocious. But go after the Bryan Kohbergers of the world with this stuff. And as we go through cold cases, let's get the geriatric Golden State Killer off the street, and we did a good job.
Well, it's closure for the family.
But I want the active shooter disengaged.
Yeah. The issue around that is that it's not just the IgG itself or the process itself. It's, in this case, where that DNA came from. And because it was never, like, the process was never produced, they're secretive with, like, they didn't save their work, all of that stuff. The sheath, everybody's dying to see the body cam footage. Like, we better see the police officer standing at the doorway, like they described in the PCA, seeing the sheath on the bed when they first discovered it, right? Like there should be photographs or, evidence of them finding this item left behind. Okay, that's one. Because the question is, how'd the sheath get there? Anybody could have planted it to frame somebody. That question wouldn't exist if it was, on a doorknob or something more permanent in the house. And then the other thing is that it was I go back and forth, transfer, touch, DNA. The reliability of that. Some states don't allow that in court at all. Like they don't even allow that because of issues with it and reliability and things like that. And I've heard that the prosecution is going to go the complete other way and try to like double down and even say, we can tell he actually touched this item because we can tell it's touch and not I shook your hand and then someone else. And the defense is going to have all these experts coming in saying that's not possible. Nobody in the scientific community believes that you can determine that.
I think the only thing that I have issue with all of the, was it transfer? Was it planted? All this stuff. Why is it Brian's? Ultimately, it had to come from his body, right? His body is exuding the DNA either through his skin cells, his hair, his fluids. His body created that DNA that ended up on that sheath.
Yes.
Why is it Brian's?
And they haven't really denied it in open court. Like they have not denied it. They have not denied it's his DNA. Well, if you're setting somebody up, it's going to be the DNA of the person you're setting up.
Yeah. And so who is that? Who's doing the setting up?
It could just be the real killers, the real perpetrators. That's who I think. I think it's the real. I don't think it's law enforcement.
And the real perpetrators have a white Elantra.
There's a lot of white Elantras around there, white cars. And I think the real killers are connected to the drug world. And we know Brian was a former heroin addict. Mm-hmm. So it's not far-fetched to think he could have relapsed or he was, who knows? Who knows? He
was going through a time.
There could be, it's plausible. Mm-hmm. It's not crazy. So every time we get into these DNA discussions, mm-hmm. It's hard for me to keep a clear train of thought because how and when things happened regarding all of that, it all comes down to, I keep asking how and when did they get to Brian's name? Mm-hmm. And I think the way that it came out as we were following the case, the first thing we heard was that the car found at the WSU campus. That's the first thing we heard about. Like they found his car in the parking lot. We heard that way before anything about DNA and the IgG. So that's why I keep getting confused about that. And then when the DNA did come out, people made tons of videos trying to make, process and go through, okay, what were the dates? When did they find his car? And then his name and then the detectives that had to testify at those hearings saying, yes, they had his name, but we didn't get it. Like just, it's been a slow piece together of all of that. And I don't think I still clearly understand that, but we'll keep talking about it until we.
Well, and that's, I think that's one of the things in the trial. I'd love to hear the timeline of how they got to Brian, right? Because mm-hmm. I've heard that a lot. How did they get to Brian? I personally believe they had some ideas of some things that were going on, but it wasn't solidified until they had the IgG.
Oh, that's for sure.
And then when they had that, it was like, okay, so we got these 5 stacks over here, and this stack is the one that we need to go through because this is where it's leading us. And nothing, and here's my opinion to this whole case. In the Bryan Kohberger stack, right? and not the hoodie guy and not the DoorDash driver and not all these other potential suspects or the drug dealers or anything or the fraternity guys and all that stuff. Everything in the Bryan Kohberger stack was like, okay, that doesn't exclude him. That doesn't exclude him. That doesn't exclude him.
Mhm.
But in every other stack, well, that excludes him too, along with the DNA. That excludes him too. That excludes, like every other pile has exclusions. The Kohberger one doesn't. I need something in that pile to exclude him. And no one's brought anything forward that shows me that he should be excluded.
I think the difference between you and I is you're taking all the it's questionable, like evidence. It's going to be disputed. All that evidence is going to be disputed. It's either circumstantial or so you're saying, okay, yes, I see that side of it and I'm believing that, and I'm just on the side of you should have at least something that's something besides that DNA, because that's questionable. His license plate, him on video going into the house. A lot of people think they have that. I, you know, that hasn't been leaked. I mean, I think you'd leak the big guns if you had that.
So let's say, just hypothetical, hoodie guy, was pretty good suspect very early on. And let's say hoodie guy drove a white car or even had a friend who drove a white car.
I think he did.
So, okay, I'm going to say that doesn't exclude him. Hoodie guy's still a good suspect, even though it may not be an Elantra, but it's a white car, or a light colored car because it's black and white or whatever. I don't know. But, let's say I can't exclude him. But what I can do is look at that car and say, oh, it has a front license plate. Now I can exclude him. Okay. Bryan Kohberger, I can't. Doesn't have a front license plate. Can't exclude. Like, there are too many stupid little details that should make it exculpatory for him, and it doesn't, because I can't exclude him.
I know that's your opinion, and that's why we're going to be able to discuss this case back and forth until we have a verdict. So probably next winter.
So yeah, well, good, because they are trying to
winter.
Well, they're trying to delay it, so who knows? But that whole list, right? So then they have this pile here. Recently, they added a new page to that pile, and this is DoorDash driver. She got arrested last year. She's on body cam, and what does she talk about? Bryan Kohberger.
Yeah, that she's going to be a witness, but we're going to talk about her on our next episode.
That's why I'm segueing towards that, yes. Because all this stuff is in his pile, and then all the new stuff that is coming out. Why isn't it going to the alternative suspect file? Why isn't it going to the drug dealer's file? Why isn't it going to this pile over here? It's all keeps going to Bryan Kohberger, and you can't exclude him because she says, yeah, I was sitting in a car next to him and I can identify Bryan Kohberger. Like, gosh darn it, this guy is not getting a break.
Yes, you're right. Like, she is a questionable witness. Like, are you going to be able to trust her because she's had like 2 DUIs and gets pulled over by the police all the time and knows the police by their first names, and is probably under pressure by them to come through for their side. So that's the positions we're going to be taking when we do talk about this.
That is in almost every crime movie I ever watch. That is how the defense debunks a witness. Yeah. Hey, she's a prostitute, so there's no way that she could identify the man that was standing right next to her because she's a prostitute. Well, she's a drug dealer, or she's been arrested 2 times for DUI, so there's no way that she could identify the guy that was standing right next to her. I love it when the defense does that, because that is the last gasp of, hey, I gotta I got to ruin the credibility of the person we're bringing on the stand than challenge, well, did he have brown hair? Was he wearing a ski mask? Like, any of that stuff. Or is your eyesight good? No, you're a bad person, so there's no way your eyes can work in a good way.
Well, I have more than just attacking the credibility. So on our next episode, you will find out how that is not just going to be the case with the other side of the DoorDash driver.
Love it.
We hope you'll meet us back here for that.
All right.
See you then. Bye.
So high I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right. Chasing stars and holding you. I can't see the end, but we'll see it through. Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it